Türkiye Cumhuriyeti'nin değerli vatandaşları sistematik...
Big military presence on the streets of the country's
Auch
two main
Zeitung Zaman und in Prediger Gülen.
President Erdogan has landed back in Istanbul.
Television outlets, 23 radio stations.
Cet ancien journaliste du quotidien Zaman.
An apparent coup attempt by part of Turkey's armed forces.
Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. Here are some of the media stories we're covering this week. When will the post-coup purge come to an end in Turkey, and what will be left of the media there? The Israeli government has issues with Facebook and has a new law in the works to deal with social media. He won an Academy Award for writing Spotlight, a film about journalism. We speak with Josh Singer on the state of the U.S. media and the coverage of the Donald Trump story.
And I don't know who to blame in the media, but our media is broken.
And Trump preps for the presidential debates as only he knows how.
I'm very pro-life.
I'm very pro-choice.
By debating himself. The reverberations are still rippling across Turkey after last month's failed military coup. The purges in the military, the police, in academia have been accompanied by a crackdown on the news media. So far, 16 television channels, 45 newspapers, 3 news agencies, and myriad websites have all been shut down. 62 journalists have been arrested with more warrants pending. The common thread here is the allegation that those journalists and news outlets are aligned with or sympathetic to the Gulen movement, led by a Turkish cleric in exile in the U.S., Fethullah Gulen. Gulen is a former ally of President Tayyip Erdogan, but that relationship went sour a few years back, and Erdogan now accuses Gulenists and their media outlets of trying to create a parallel state in Turkey and masterminding the coup attempt. Ultimately, this is a story about the threat to democracy in Turkey, which has proven to be very real, and the proportionality of the government's response to that threat. It also revealed that given a choice between a democratically elected government that has been very tough on the news media and a military coup, Turkish news outlets opted to back the former. Our starting point this week is Istanbul. A parade of Turkish journalists rounded up and taken to court for alleged ties to the Gulen movement, the organization the government says was behind the botched coup. The number of journalists arrested, 62, was just that, a number, until a reporter based in Washington, Mahir Zeynalov, through a simple yet potent series of tweets, turned their legal cases into stories by showing the faces behind the figures.
There's a story behind of each of these reporters. They are excellent columnists, excellent reporters. And I can say that not all of them were Gülen movement followers. There's, for example, Şahin Alpay, who is a left-wing columnist who has been always supporting liberal democracy. If there's someone who should be blamed for military coup d'etat, Şahin Alpay would be the last one. Or Nazlı Ilıcak, who is a liberal democrat who has always promoted civilian governments and always wanted lesser role of military in politics. And when I decided to tell their stories, I summed up in every tweet. I posted their photos, handcuff photos, and at the end of each tweet, I wrote arrested as the price they paid for standing up to the government.
I know Mahir personally, and I know his organization he ties. He's a decent man, but unfortunately, his organization, the newspaper, they are part of this Gülenist organization. We have to understand that this was one of the biggest attacks that happened in modern history of Turkey. Our parliament was bombed. Over 200 people, women, children, and men are killed in streets of Istanbul and Ankara. So this is not a purge. This is not something that's like a taking revenge. No, this is only a judicial process after a terrorist attack.
President Erdogan's accusations that Gulen-aligned media outlets are anti-democratic are not new. They've just intensified. For 4 years now, the government has been dismantling Gulen-aligned media, taking over some of those outlets, shutting others down. Their influence had already waned. Up until 2012, however, Gulenist media outlets and Tayyip Erdogan were working hand in hand. Fethullah Gulen, the Islamic cleric, used his social and educational movement to support Erdogan's AK Party. Media outlets allied or affiliated with Gulen came later, including Zaman, which grew into Turkey's largest newspaper. In that respect, President Erdogan brought this problem on himself which he admitted to and apologized for this past week.
Açık konuşuyorum. Şahsen ben de katılmadığım pek çok yönleri olmasına rağmen asgari müştereklerde buluşabildiğimiz zannıyla her kesim gibi bunlara yardımcı oldum. Bu hain örgütün gerçek yüzünü çok daha önceden ortaya dökememiş olmanın üzüntüsü içindeyim. Rabbim de milletim de bizi affetsin.
Tayyip Erdogan has fallen out with media conglomerates before. In 2009, it was a company called Doğan Yayın that clashed with Erdogan and suddenly found itself with a $1 billion fine for back taxes. Other Turkish media outlets, eager at the time to make nice with a government that was curbing freedom of the press, failed to back Doğan Yayın, and Gülen-owned newspapers and television channels were right there among them.
The pressure on the Turkish media didn't begin on the 15th of July. Since 2007, there's been intensive pressure on the mainstream media. And up until 2012, the Gülen movement itself was in part responsible. While journalists were being arrested, while newspapers weren't able to function and a climate of fear was spreading, the Gülen movement was telling the world that there is democracy and a free press in Turkey.
And that's particularly the main reason why now liberals and seculars are not really supporting the Gülen movement when the government is trying to crack down on these people. The problem was not that they were promoting the Gülen movement. The problem was that they were not really doing their job professionally.
In the 13 years since Tayyip Erdogan was first elected prime minister, the vast majority of privately owned TV channels in Turkey have become pro-government. But on the night of the coup, even channels like CNN Turk, still owned by Doğan Yayın, backed their democratically elected government over the plotters, who took over the state-owned channel TRT and reportedly forced this anchorwoman to read their statement at gunpoint.
Türk Silahlı Kuvvetleri'nin bir emridir.
The people trying to overthrow the government thought announcing the coup on TRT would ensure its success, which shows how backwards and dated their thinking is. By the time the soldiers had captured the TRT building, the coup was being repelled on the screens of independent and private media channels. The president called in to CNN Turk via FaceTime to urge his supporters to go out on the streets and stop the coup. Indeed, the coup was overthrown by the CNN Turk broadcast.
I think that was a real moment in Turkish journalism where you had television stations that were pro-government and against the government standing together, and in the light of the threat to their own safety as well, continuing with their broadcasts against the coup.
On the international media, the president's supporters have complained about the coverage of the coup coming out of the US, which happens to be where Fethullah Gülen lives in self-imposed exile. A popular theory both in Turkish media
Artık neredeyse herkesin fikir birliğine vardığı, bu iş olsa olsa bir CIA projesidir tezinin
and on the streets is that the United States government was behind the coup and that Washington was out to get President Erdogan.
Let's face it, Mr. Gülen is in the United States. The United States, up till now, have not really taken the demands of Turkey with regards to his return and this threat that he constitutes very seriously. Let's also face it that initial reactions coming from US policymakers, particularly the US media, have not really quite understood the significance and trauma of this event.
Turkey hasn't seen enough support from international media. International community does not understand what Turkey is going through. We haven't seen that strong statements against an attack to democracy. It makes people to think such theories.
And Turkey today is fertile ground for conspiracy theories. Washington's involvement is just one of them. That Gulenists were responsible is an allegation. But the purge, the journalists arrested, the papers and TV channels no longer available, that is reality. And Turks will be living with that reality long after the theories and allegations have proven whether they can stand the test of time. On the download now, our viewers on the media in the aftermath of the failed coup in Turkey.
We are proud of the heroic stance of the workers at CNN Turk and TRT that night against the coup. However, there are strong grounds to believe that some journalists were among the coup plotters, and it's only normal that they will be investigated under a due process, and a fair trial will shed light on whether they're really guilty or not.
Other media stories that are on our radar this week. There's a new piece of legislation before the Israeli parliament pertaining to Facebook that critics say represents a threat to freedom of expression. The bill was co-signed by Security Minister Gilad Erdan and, if passed, would empower courts to compel Facebook and other social media sites to remove content deemed violent and impose a fine on networks that fail to comply.
אני בעד שאדון מרק צוקרברג, שאני אומר בצער רב, חלק מהדם של הנרצחים.
Early last month, Erdogan went on television to denounce Facebook, just as 5 Israeli and American families whose relatives were killed in attacks in Israel and the occupied territories filed a class action lawsuit in New York seeking $1 billion in damages from Facebook. They argue the social network knowingly provided material support and resources to Hamas, facilitating this terrorist group's ability to communicate and carry out attacks. Facebook did not respond directly to the lawsuit, but has reiterated its policy, quote, "We urge people to use our reporting tools if they find content that they believe violates our standards, so we can investigate and take swift action." The UK's Guardian newspaper is desperate to cut costs after a disastrous financial year, and so the newsroom is shrinking significantly in size. More than 250 employees, including 70 journalists, are leaving, taking buyouts. They include Middle East editor Ian Black, who we've had here on the Listening Post, digital editor Matt Wells, and security reporter Richard Norton-Taylor. The Guardian Media Group, the paper's parent company, has announced a record loss of $230 million, raising questions about the Guardian's business model. The newspaper has long resisted going the paywall route, advocating free content instead, and then becoming the second most read online newspaper in the world. However, with Facebook and Google dominating the mobile ad market, plus the rise of ad blockers, The Guardian is now betting on a membership model, relying more and more on voluntary donations from loyal readers. And the jury's still out on that strategy. Journalists in Tajikistan have been advised to keep it simple, not by their editors, but by their government, which says it will fine them for using words that are, quote, incomprehensible to readers. President Emomali Rahman, who's held power there since 1992, has a thing about language, banning Russian as an official language in Tajikistan in 2009. His government also takes issue with the influence of Persian and Dari, spoken in nearby Iran and Afghanistan. This new ban on incomprehensible language, according to reports on Russian news sites, relates to words imported from Persian. The fines can run up to $100, which is the equivalent to the monthly wage there, and double for the organization those journalists work for. We're going to take a look at the news business now through the lens of a filmmaker, or to be more precise, through the pen of a screenwriter. Josh Singer won the Academy Award this year for the Best Original Screenplay. Singer co-wrote Spotlight, the story of the Boston Globe's investigation in 2001 into sexual misconduct by Roman Catholic priests in Massachusetts, as well as the church's role in covering up those crimes against children. Singer was also the screenwriter behind The Fifth Estate, the 2013 film about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. This is a writer who makes his living in Hollywood, but his films have a lot to say about journalism, how the industry works, the crucial role it can still play in society, but also the ways journalism can fall short. I sat down with Josh Singer recently in New York City to discuss his films, the state of journalism in America today, the Donald Trump phenomenon, and the media's role in that. Josh Singer, thank you for joining us here at the Listening Post today.
My pleasure.
Let's get to Spotlight. And some of the characters in there fascinate me. Marty Barron, who's the editor, a Jewish American, coming into a city known for its Irish Catholic heritage.
You want to sue the church? Technically, we wouldn't sue the church. We'd file a motion to lift the seal on those documents.
Garabedian, the lawyer, Armenian background.
It takes an outsider, like me.
Two outsiders, one pushing the story from the editor's office,
Yeah.
one pushing it from the legal side.
Yeah.
When you look at the state of journalism in America today, and you can look at the White House press corps, you can look at the coverage of Wall Street, you can look at sports coverage on ESPN. It's all about the inside. And I'm wondering whether you give any thought to the outsider-insider thing and where the value really lies and what audiences really need from our journalists.
I think the role of the journalist is very challenging, right? Because on the one hand, you are the outsider holding people accountable, and yet on the other hand, how do you get your information? You have to be an insider. So Leslie Stahl on 60 Minutes is interviewing Pence and Trump. She points out that Pence supported the war in Iraq. She makes a big deal of the fact, like, well, you've called out Hillary Clinton for supporting the war in Iraq. And she calls him out on that, and he gives some, ridiculous response.
He's entitled to make a mistake every once in a while.
But she's not. Okay, come on.
But she's not.
She's not.
No, she's not.
But what's amazing is she didn't call him out on the bigger lie, which is that actually he supported the war in Iraq. So why is it that our journalists don't hold him accountable? Right? Is it that they're too inside? Is it that they need him too much? They should say that to his face. Why don't they? Similarly,
What's the answer to that? They don't want to lose
they're going to get
access.
cut off. They're not going to be able to interview him. They need access.
They want the front row seat in the news conference, and they want the seat on the panel.
Right. I'll give you another example. I am a Hillary Clinton fan, but I think she has her issues as well. So Lawrence O'Donnell, right, who happens...
MSNBC host.
The night after Comey comes out with his big spiel on Hillary, right, where he basically says, look, what she did is not illegal, but it's definitely bad. And yes, she's been lying to you about what happened, right? Lawrence held her responsible.
We cannot find a case that would support bringing criminal charges on these facts.
What if there was one?
And his viewership all reacted horribly. They were all angry at him. And they all wrote nasty tweets to Lawrence, why are you doing this?
Well, that's because MSNBC's viewership skews left.
And that is the problem with America right now.
It's one of them.
That is one of the problems with America, which is we need to hold even our heroes accountable.
Okay, well, let me take some of that back to Spotlight.
Where is the editorial responsibility in publishing records of this nature?
Well, where's the editorial responsibility in not publishing them?
We wanted to demonstrate what journalism is. And here was an opportunity just to show what good journalism was.
Yeah.
If we could just do this right and show them uncovering this, huge case, we could actually show why this kind of journalism was so important. And perhaps in showing why this journalism is so important with the knowledge, right, that that so many of people like the Spotlight team guys have lost their jobs over the last 15 years, then people might have a better understanding of, oh my goodness, this is important.
The Boston Globe newsroom that we see in Spotlight, resources, how big it was, the number of people in it, versus the Boston Globe newsroom today, which I understand you have visited. Visually, how do they differ?
So visually, in terms of the structure, they're the exact same. Same building, So we actually shot at the Globe, and we shot at our set in Toronto, which we rebuilt to look exactly like the Globe. Sadly, the Globe is now selling that building. They're going to move into the center of town, and so that's all about to change. So we got it under the wire.
Smaller facility.
Right. There are, it's a quarter of the staff. Right. I think the newsroom was 400-some people when Marty Barron took over, and now it's closer to 100. And so if you have less journalists on the front lines doing that work, you have a problem.
We dissected like every little flaw.
Usual Democrat saying the usual stuff.
Mud wrestle. It is a mud
Party of love versus the party of hate.
Not this fear-mongering, not this divisiveness,
What is
not
wrong?
this disgusting speech that we heard tonight.
And what's upsetting to me is the noise. It's so hard to find the truth anymore, right? You go back 20 years and you had respected organizations with respected newsrooms who were giving you what you thought was the truth. And there used to be a culture of a newsroom, which was, we are going to put out the truth, we're going to be very careful about what we print. Does that happen in this day and age? I mean, maybe under Marty Barron it does, but anywhere else, right, you wind up in this post-factual universe, where you have no idea what to believe because there's so much information out there and no one's sifting through it for you.
The other scene that stuck with me was when they're going through all the old records and they're using their rulers to go down to find which priests have been moved for this particular reason. And that's a search that today, presumably, if conducted on a computer, would take a few seconds. I guess what I'm trying to get at is they did the kind of journalism then that we seldom see now, and it's so much easier to do it now.
Well, right. So a good example is, take Melania Trump's speech that was very quickly identified as being plagiarized from Michelle Obama's speech in 2008. That was an out-of-work LA Times reporter in a Starbucks. Now, how does he get that information so quickly? He probably just Googled Michelle Obama's speech in 2008. So there's no question that there are more tools at the fingertips of the journalists. But I think one of the things we really tried to get across in the movie was the process. It is about going out there and doing that and talking to people and getting information. It's not just Googling stuff. And I think, in some ways, the things we were able to say in Spotlight about journalism, because we're looking at that story 15 years later, we're able to have much more perspective and say much bigger things about it. If I were writing the story of WikiLeaks right now, I would take a much different tack because I know what happened with Snowden. And what I would be interested in is that Julian really pioneered this thing of taking data and giving it to news organizations and this front end, back end, and how that worked.
This is a code to a temporary site. I'll send you the link in 24 hours. You'll find the war logs there.
So it's a deal. We publish, you publish.
For someone in my position who's trying to tell a narrative, it's almost hubristic to try to approach it when you're right on top of it, without the lens of history.
The Trump phenomenon, the media blank show, are they to blame? Where does the responsibility lie? Is it just an imperfect storm of happenstance, a one-off? Is this where we're going?
There are so many lies and so many false steps. The thing about Trump is that Trump lies, he gets called out on it, and he keeps lying.
Yeah.
And why is that possible? Why is it possible that a politician can lie about something, get called out on what the truth is, and continue to lie? And that's what, and I don't know who to blame in the media, but our media is broken.
Anyway, it sounds like you've thought a lot about this.
A little bit.
It sounds like screenplay in the works?
Well, next, oddly enough, is I just wrote a movie about Neil Armstrong, which I'm pretty excited about.
The first man to land on the moon. So you're just tired of journalism?
No.
You're going to outer space to get away from journalism? Personally, I wish you would make more films about journalism. Josh Singer, congratulations on Spotlight, and we wish you all the best with your future projects.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it.
And finally, with all the speeches he's made, debates he's been a part of, and the media coverage he's received, you might think you have a pretty good idea of what Donald Trump thinks about walls, Muslims, Hillary Clinton, the news media. But figuring out what Trump actually believes is another story. An anonymous YouTuber called Plainsight has dug into the Trump media archives, so you don't have to, and found numerous issues on which Trump flat out contradicts himself. All of it on the record, most of it live on the air. Is he anti-abortion or not? Does he think Hillary Clinton is competent or not? Is he a Republican or a Democrat? Trump Exposes Trump features nearly 6 minutes of Donald Trump flip-flopping like a fish on a dock. We've cut it down to size. And we'll see you next time here at The Listening Post.
I'm the only one on the stage that said we should not go into Iraq.
Are you for invading Iraq?
Yeah, I guess so. I wish it was. I wish the first time it was done correctly.
I'm very pro-life. I'm very pro-choice. She has no natural talent to be president.
She's very talented, and she has a husband that I also like very much.
They're here illegally. You take them, they have to go back.
We have to show some compassion.
You're right.
We just can't throw everybody out.
I'm a conservative person. The Republicans are just too crazy right. I mean, just what's going on is just nuts. Bush says, I do not believe he's a true conservative. These people are stupid.
Do you identify more as a Democrat or a Republican?
in many cases, I probably identify more as a Democrat.